They laughed when the poorest Omega spent her last 5 coins on a filthy little wolf pup with a sack covering his head. They called her foolish. They called the pup cursed. They said she had just wasted the only money she had left to survive the week. But 3 months later, every alpha in the kingdom would fall to one knee before that same forgotten child. And the woman they once mocked would become the only person powerful enough to change the fate of an entire kingdom. Because the broken pup no one wanted wasn't abandoned at all. He was hiding a secret so dangerous that people had killed to keep it buried. And the moment one lonely Omega chose kindness over fear, destiny woke up. What happened next would make an Alpha King question everything he believed about power and prove that sometimes the greatest treasure in the world can be bought for just 5 coins. The rain fell so hard that it washed the colors from the streets of Moonshadow Kingdom. But it could not wash away cruelty. It could not wash away hunger. And it could never wash away the cruel way people looked at an Omega. Every year, the kingdom celebrated the Wolf Festival. Golden banners fluttered above the market. Music echoed through the crowded streets. Children laughed as they chased one another between colorful stalls. Merchants shouted about rare herbs, enchanted weapons, and fresh bread. To outsiders, Moonshadow looked like the happiest kingdom in the world. But hidden behind the music, there was another market. A market few people liked to speak about. One where forgotten creatures, abandoned wolf pups, and unwanted servants were sold for whatever price someone was willing to pay. That was where Elara found herself that cold afternoon. Not because she wanted to, because hunger had brought her there. Her clothes were patched together from old fabric. Her boots had holes in the soles. Rain dripped from her brown hair onto tired shoulders that had carried far too many burdens for someone so young. Inside her hand rested 5 small silver coins. 5 coins. Everything she owned. Enough to buy stale bread that would hopefully last another week. She whispered softly to herself. Just bread today. No dreams. No mistakes. She lowered her eyes as several noble wolves walked past. One alpha bumped into her shoulder. She stumbled backward. The basket she carried fell into the mud. The alpha looked down at her with disgust. Watch where you're standing, Omega. His friends laughed. One woman covered her nose dramatically. They should keep Omegas outside the city walls. They ruin the festival. Elara quietly picked up her empty basket. I'm sorry. She always apologized, even when nothing was her fault. Because surviving as an Omega often meant swallowing your pride before someone else crushed it for you. She continued walking. The smell of fresh bread drifted through the air. Her stomach growled painfully. She smiled sadly. Almost there. Then, a strange sound stopped her. Not a bark. Not a growl. A tiny cry. So soft. It almost disappeared beneath the rain. Elara slowly turned her head. In the darkest corner of the market stood an old wooden cage. Its bars were rusted. Its roof was broken. Rain poured inside without mercy. Several children stood nearby. They laughed while tossing tiny stones into the cage. Move, ugly thing. Show us your face. I bet it has no eyes. One stone struck something inside. A small whimper answered. The merchants didn't stop them. Instead, they laughed too. Curiosity pulled Elara closer. Inside the cage sat the smallest wolf pup she had ever seen. His thin body trembled from cold. His silver fur was soaked with rain and dirt. Around his head, someone had tied a rough brown sack with old rope. Only his tiny nose peeked through. His paws were scraped and bleeding. He didn't fight back. He didn't growl. He simply curled into himself, as though hoping the world would forget he existed. Elara felt her heart tighten. She slowly knelt before the cage. Hey! The little pup flinched, then shrank farther into the corner. It's all right. I won't hurt you. The merchant rolled his eyes. Don't waste your kindness. That thing isn't worth feeding. Another trader joined him. Found him near the Forbidden Mountains. Probably cursed. Maybe blind. Maybe possessed. No alpha wants him. No family wants him. So he'll probably die here. The children laughed again. One reached for another stone. Before he could throw it, Elara gently caught his wrist. Please don't. The boy frowned. It's only a cursed animal. She looked toward the frightened pup.
No.
It's only scared. For one brief second, the market became strangely quiet. Even the merchants stared at her. One of them burst into laughter. Listen to the Omega. She thinks kindness changes monsters. The crowd laughed with him. Elara ignored every voice. She looked only at the trembling little creature. Very slowly, she slid 2 fingers through the cage. The pup hesitated. His tiny nose twitched. He sniffed her hand. Another heartbeat passed. Then, very carefully, he placed one shaking paw into her palm. It was freezing cold. His little body relaxed, just enough to stop trembling. Elara smiled. There you are. I knew you were brave. The merchant shrugged. If you like garbage so much, you can buy him. She looked up. How much? The trader smirked. 5 coins. The smile disappeared from her face. 5 coins. Exactly what she needed for food. If she bought the pup, she would have nothing left. No bread. No firewood. Nothing. Her stomach growled again. She closed her fingers tightly around the small pouch hanging from her belt. The merchant folded his arms. Well, you buying him or not? The little pup slowly lowered his head again, as if he already expected the answer. As if everyone always walked away. Elara looked at the coins, then at the frightened little wolf. Back to the coins. Back to him. A tear slipped beneath the edge of the sack covering his face. One single tear. That was enough. Without another word, she untied the pouch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The silver coins landed inside the merchant's hand. The crowd gasped, then burst into laughter. The poor Omega has gone mad. She chose a useless mutt over food. She'll starve before winter. What a fool. The merchant unlocked the rusty cage. Take your curse. Elara ignored every cruel voice. She carefully lifted the tiny pup into her arms. He weighed almost nothing, like someone who hadn't eaten properly for days, maybe weeks. He buried his face against her shoulder, still hiding beneath the old sack, still shaking, but no longer alone. She whispered softly into his tiny ear, "You don't belong in a cage anymore. I'm taking you home." As she turned away from the market, the rain grew heavier. The people kept laughing behind her. None of them noticed. The little pup slowly reached out with one trembling paw and gently wrapped it around Elara's finger. She stopped walking. Her eyes widened. No one had held her hand like that since she was a little girl. A small smile warmed her tired face. It's all right. We'll take care of each other. High above the market, hidden beneath the roof of a distant tower, a tall man dressed in a black cloak silently watched them disappear into the rain. His golden eyes narrowed for only a moment. He couldn't explain why, but the instant the Omega carried that tiny pup away, the air itself had changed. And somewhere beneath the old sack covering the frightened child's head, for the briefest heartbeat, 2 glowing blue eyes opened, then vanished into darkness. The road leading away from the market was quiet. Only the sound of rain followed Elara as she walked toward the edge of Moonshadow Kingdom. She held the tiny pup close to her chest to keep him warm.
His little body was still shaking.
Every few steps, she looked down at him with a gentle smile. You are safe now. No one will throw stones at you again. The pup did not answer. He only held her finger a little tighter. The streets slowly became empty. The grand stone houses disappeared behind her. Soon the road turned into a narrow dirt path surrounded by tall pine trees. This was where the poor lived. Far away from the rich. Far away from the palace. Far away from anyone who cared. Elara finally reached her home. It was a tiny wooden cabin hidden beside the forest. The roof leaned to one side. Several wooden boards had been nailed across broken windows. Smoke no longer came from the chimney because there was almost no firewood left. She pushed the old door open. The cabin was small. A single bed stood near the wall. A worn wooden table sat beside a tiny fireplace. There was almost nothing else. She smiled anyway. It is not much, but it is ours. She gently placed the little pup beside the fireplace. Then she searched through a small basket. After a long moment, she found one dry cloth. She slowly wrapped it around his tiny body. There. A little warmer. The pup looked at her without making a sound. The rough sack still covered his face. She carefully reached toward the rope. If it hurts, I can take it off. The moment her fingers touched the knot, the little pup jumped backward. He pressed himself into the corner. His breathing became fast. Fear filled every movement. Elara quickly lowered her hand. I am sorry. I will never force you. You can keep it on as long as you want. The little pup slowly relaxed. After a few moments, he stepped forward again. He rested his tiny head against her knee. As though thanking her, Elara gently stroked his back. I think you need a name. She looked outside. The rain had begun to wash dark ashes from an old burned tree nearby. Tiny gray pieces floated through the air. She smiled softly. Ash. I will call you Ash. The little pup lifted his head. His tail moved once, very slowly. Then once again. Elara laughed for the first time in many days. So you like it? Ash it is. Her laughter filled the little cabin with warmth that the fireplace could not give. For the first time in a long while, the lonely house did not feel empty. Evening slowly arrived. Elara opened a small wooden box. Inside was only one potato, half an onion, and a handful of dried herbs. She looked at the food, then at Ash. I guess we will share. She cut the potato into tiny pieces. She made the soup thin by adding more water. It was not enough for two, but she smiled as if it were a feast. She placed the bowl in front of Ash first. He looked at the soup, then back at her. He did not eat. It is for you. He pushed the bowl toward her instead. Elara blinked in surprise. You want me to eat? Ash gently nudged the bowl again. She smiled with wet eyes. You really are kind. She divided the soup into two smaller bowls. Neither of them had enough. But somehow it tasted better because they shared it. After dinner, the wind became stronger. Cold air slipped through the cracks in the walls. Elara walked to her bed. She picked up her only blanket. For a moment she looked at it quietly. Then she tore it into two pieces. One half covered her shoulders. The other half covered Ash. He looked at the blanket, then at her. You need it more than I do. She lay down on the old bed. Ash slowly climbed onto the floor beside her. Within seconds, another loud clap of thunder shook the forest. Ash cried out. He rushed beneath the bed. His whole body trembled. Elara climbed onto the floor beside him. She did not pull him out. She simply sat there. It is all right. The storm cannot reach you here. My mother used to tell me that every storm ends. I still believe her. Ash slowly crawled closer. He rested against her arm. Before long, his breathing became calm. He finally fell asleep. Elara smiled. Good night, little one. Outside, the rain slowly stopped. The moon rose above the trees. Silver light entered through the broken window. Inside the cabin, everything looked peaceful. But something strange began to happen. Soft blue light slowly appeared beneath the old sack covering Ash's head. Tiny glowing symbols spread across the cloth. Ancient marks that had not been seen for hundreds of years. They shone brighter with every passing second. Outside the cabin, birds landed silently on the roof. Deer stepped out from the forest. Foxes gathered near the door. Even great wolves emerged from the darkness. None of them made a sound. They simply looked toward the little cabin, as though waiting for someone they had searched for all their lives. Far away beyond the forest, several royal scouts suddenly stopped their horses. One looked toward the sky. Did you feel that? Another slowly nodded. Ancient alpha magic. It has returned. The oldest scout tightened his grip on the reins. Find the source. No matter where it leads. Back inside the cabin, Elara remained asleep. She knew nothing about the glowing symbols. Nothing about the animals waiting outside. Nothing about the powerful magic awakening only a few feet away. Then, deep within the shadows of the forest, a giant black wolf silently opened his glowing golden eyes. He stared directly at Elara's cabin. Without making a single sound, he took one slow step forward. Morning arrived with soft golden light spilling through the broken windows of Elara's little cabin. The storm had passed. Drops of rain still clung to the leaves outside. Birds sang from the branches as if nothing strange had happened during the night. Elara stretched and smiled when she saw Ash still sleeping peacefully beneath his half of the blanket. For the first time in many years, she did not wake up feeling completely alone. She quietly stood and walked outside with an old wooden bucket. The nearby stream was cold and clear. As she filled the bucket, she noticed fresh wolf tracks in the soft mud. There were dozens of them.
Large, deep,
Far bigger than any normal wolf. She frowned. Strange. I don't remember wolves coming this close. She looked around. The forest was silent. Almost too silent. A cool breeze brushed against her face. For just a second she felt as though someone was watching her. When she turned, there was no one. She carried the water back home. Ash was awake now. He sat beside the fireplace waiting for her. The little sack still covered his head. The moment he heard her footsteps, his tail wagged happily. Elara laughed. Good morning, Ash. I hope you slept well. Ash nodded once. It was a tiny movement, but it made her heart feel lighter. She prepared another simple breakfast. Only dry bread soaked in warm water. She placed it in front of Ash. Again, he pushed half of it back toward her. You always want to share. She smiled. Then we will share. After breakfast, Elara gathered her basket. I need firewood. You stay here. Ash immediately shook his head. His little paws hurried toward the door. You want to come? He nodded quickly. Elara sighed with a smile. All right. But stay close to me. The two walked into the forest together. Sunlight slipped through the tall trees. The peaceful path made it easy to forget how dangerous the world could be. Ash stayed close to Elara's side every step of the way. Whenever she picked up a fallen branch, he tried to carry a smaller one. The sticks were almost as big as he was. He struggled with all his strength. Elara giggled. You are helping already. You have such a brave little heart. Ash looked up at her. Though she could not see his eyes beneath the sack, she somehow felt him smiling. Far away on a rocky hill, a black horse came to a stop. Its rider slowly looked toward the forest below. He wore dark armor trimmed with silver. His long black cloak moved gently in the wind. Every guard behind him remained completely silent. No one dared speak before their king. King Kale closed his eyes. Again, he felt it. That same ancient energy. It was stronger than yesterday. Not wild. Not evil. Hidden. Very carefully hidden. One of his captains stepped forward. My king. Our scouts found no rogue alphas. Kale opened his golden eyes. They were searching for the wrong thing. He looked toward the trees. The power is there. It wants to remain unseen. Without another word, he urged his horse forward. Deep inside the forest, Elara had no idea the Alpha King himself was riding toward her. She had finished gathering firewood. Ash happily carried one tiny bundle tied together with vines. Suddenly, he stopped walking. His ears twitched beneath the sack. His body became still. Elara noticed immediately. What is it? Ash slowly turned toward the deeper forest. A low breeze moved between the trees. Then, silence. The birds stopped singing. Even the leaves became still. Heavy footsteps echoed through the woods. One. Then another. Then another. Elara instinctively pulled Ash behind her. From between the trees emerged a massive black wolf. Its golden eyes shone brightly. Its body was almost twice the size of an ordinary wolf. Ash did not hide. He quietly stared at the giant creature. The wolf stared back. Several long seconds passed. Elara's heart pounded. She whispered softly, Please, don't hurt him. The giant wolf took one slow step closer. Then another. Elara spread her arms in front of Ash. You will not touch him. Her voice shook, but she did not move aside. The wolf lowered its enormous head. It sniffed the air. Then, to Elara's complete surprise, the great beast slowly bowed. Only for a brief moment. Then it turned around and disappeared into the forest without making a sound. Elara stood frozen. What was that? Ash gently reached for her hand. She looked down at him. You are safe. That is all that matters. Neither of them noticed that someone had witnessed everything, hidden behind thick trees. King Kale watched silently. He had seen the ancient guardian wolf, a creature that bowed to no one, not even to kings. Yet today, it had lowered its head before a frightened little pup. Kale narrowed his eyes. This is impossible. His gaze slowly shifted toward Elara. She was only a poor Omega. Her clothes were worn. Her hands were rough from hard work. Yet she had stepped in front of the guardian without hesitation. Not to protect herself. To protect someone weaker. For reasons he could not explain, the sight remained in his mind. As Elara and Ash disappeared deeper into the forest, King Kale quietly spoke. Find out who that Omega is. I want to know everything. High above them, hidden among the trees, a pair of cold eyes watched the same scene. Lady Selene smiled without warmth. So, the king has finally noticed someone. Her smile slowly faded. If that girl has something valuable, I will take it away from her. King Kale remained hidden among the trees long after Elara and Ash had disappeared. His captain stepped beside him. My king, should we follow them now? Kale kept his eyes on the narrow forest path.
No.
If they wished to hide, they would have hidden already. The captain looked confused. Then, why does the ancient guardian protect them? Kale did not answer immediately. In all his years, he had never seen the sacred black wolf bow to anyone. Not to nobles. Not to warriors. Not even to the Alpha King himself. Yet it had lowered its head before a frightened little pup wearing an old sack. Something impossible was happening, and Kale intended to discover the truth. He turned toward his soldiers. No one is to approach the Omega. No one is to frighten the child. We watch. We wait. If anyone harms them, his golden eyes became cold. They answer to me. The soldiers lowered their heads. Yes, my king. Far away inside the royal palace, another conversation was taking place. Lady Selene stood beside a tall window overlooking the kingdom. A nervous spy knelt before her. I followed the girl exactly as you ordered. Selene slowly turned. What did you see? The Alpha King watched her. Her expression hardened. For how long? The entire afternoon. The spy lowered his eyes. He even ordered his guards not to disturb her. Silence filled the room. Selene walked toward the fireplace. She stared into the flames. So, a poor Omega has captured the king's attention. She smiled without kindness. That cannot continue. She looked at another servant. Find everything about her. Who she speaks to. Where she lives. And, especially, her voice became colder. The child. If that creature has value, it will belong to me. Back at the little cabin, Elara stacked the firewood beside the door. Ash helped by carrying one tiny branch at a time. Each trip made Elara laugh. You are working very hard. Ash proudly placed another stick onto the pile. He looked as though he had just built an entire castle. You deserve a reward. She reached into her pocket and found a single dried berry. It was the last sweet thing she owned. She held it out. Ash looked at the berry, then gently pushed her hand back. You first. Elara smiled.
No.
You earned it. After a moment, he carefully broke the berry into 2 tiny pieces. He handed one piece back to her. She laughed softly. You always make sure we both have enough. The little cabin echoed with quiet happiness. Outside, the trees swayed gently in the evening breeze. Neither of them noticed several hidden royal guards watching from a safe distance. Kale had kept his promise. No danger would reach the cabin unnoticed. As darkness covered the forest, Elara lit a tiny oil lamp. The warm light danced across the wooden walls. She sat beside Ash. My mother used to tell me stories every night. I think you deserve one too. Ash curled beside her. His little head rested against her arm. Elara began speaking in a soft voice. There was once a lonely wolf who believed no one would ever love him. But one day someone saw his heart instead of his scars. And everything changed. Ash listened without moving. Slowly his breathing became peaceful. Within minutes, he had fallen asleep. Elara gently brushed the dust from the old sack covering his head. You must have been so lonely before we met. I promise. You will never be alone again. A single tear slipped beneath the edge of the sack. She smiled sadly. You understand, don't you? Outside the cabin, something extraordinary began happening once more. Silver flowers that had been dead for years slowly opened beneath the moonlight. Trees covered with dry branches suddenly bloomed with fresh green leaves. Small glowing butterflies filled the night air. Every creature in the forest quietly gathered around the cabin. Deer stood without fear. Foxes rested near the steps. Owls watched from the branches. Even the great black guardian wolf returned. This time he lay peacefully near the front door like a silent protector. Far beyond the forest, royal scouts stopped again. One pointed toward the glowing woods. The magic is stronger tonight, another whispered. It feels alive. The oldest scout slowly removed an ancient map from his bag. He looked at the glowing forest, then at a faded symbol drawn on the map. His face turned pale. It cannot be. A younger scout stepped closer. What is wrong? The old man swallowed hard. This symbol belongs to the lost royal bloodline, the same bloodline that disappeared 20 years ago. If I am right. He looked toward Elara's distant cabin. The heir has awakened. At that exact moment, deep inside the cabin, Ash suddenly opened his eyes. Brilliant blue light shone beneath the old sack. Ancient glowing markings spread across the wooden floor beneath him. The room filled with silent power. Ash slowly stood, still asleep. His small feet carried him toward the open door. Without making a sound, he stepped outside. The great black guardian wolf immediately lowered his head. Then another wolf appeared. Then another. Within seconds, dozens of ancient wolves emerged from the darkness. One by one, every single one of them knelt before the tiny child. And Ash silently walked deeper into the moonlit forest, completely unaware that an entire kingdom was about to begin searching for him. The ancient wolves moved through the forest without making a sound. Their silver and black fur shimmered beneath the moonlight. Each one was large enough to frighten even the bravest warrior. Yet not one of them showed their fangs. Not one of them growled. Instead, they followed the tiny pup with quiet respect. Ash walked slowly between them. His eyes remained closed. He was still asleep. The old sack covered his face as glowing blue light slipped through the rough cloth. Ancient symbols appeared beneath his tiny paws with every step. The forest itself seemed to awaken. Dead flowers bloomed again. Dry streams began to flow. Old trees covered in broken branches slowly grew fresh green leaves. It was as if the land recognized someone it had been waiting for. Far behind the strange procession, the great black guardian wolf lifted his head toward the moon. He released one long, haunting howl. The sound rolled across the mountains. It crossed rivers. It reached villages. Even the royal palace seemed to tremble beneath its echo. Inside his chamber, King Kale slowly opened his eyes. He had been unable to sleep. The howl reached his ears. His expression changed at once. He knew that voice. The guardian. He stood from his chair. His closest captain hurried into the room. My king. You heard it. Kale nodded. The guardian never howls without reason. He fastened his dark cloak around his shoulders. Saddle my horse. We leave immediately. The captain hesitated. Tonight. Kale looked toward the window where the full moon hung above the forest. Especially tonight. Within minutes, several royal riders raced through the palace gates. Their horses thundered across the empty roads. None of them knew what they were chasing. Only their king understood one thing. Something ancient had awakened. Back at the cabin, Elara suddenly opened her eyes. The room felt strangely cold. She reached toward the floor beside her. Her hand touched nothing. Her heart skipped. Ash. She sat up quickly. The little blanket lay empty. The front door was slightly open. Moonlight spilled across the wooden floor. Fear rushed through her chest. Ash. She searched every corner of the tiny cabin. Behind the table. Under the bed. Near the fireplace. Nothing. The little pup was gone. She grabbed her old lantern without thinking. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped it. No. No, no. Please. She rushed outside. The cold night air struck her face.
Ash.
Only silence answered. She looked toward the dark forest. Fresh little paw prints stretched into the trees. Without hesitation, she followed them. Branches scratched her arms. Sharp rocks cut through her worn boots. She never slowed down.
Ash.
Please answer me. Tears filled her eyes. You promised we would stay together. The deeper she ran, the stranger the forest became. Blue flowers glowed beside the path. Tiny lights floated through the air. Animals stood quietly among the trees watching her pass. None of them looked afraid. It felt as though the entire forest wanted her to keep moving. Far ahead, Ash continued walking. The wolves surrounded him in a wide circle. They watched him with complete loyalty. One old white wolf slowly stepped closer. It lowered its head until its nose almost touched Ash's tiny paw. The blue light around Ash became brighter. A gentle breeze swept through the clearing. Then, the wolves all knelt together. Hundreds of golden eyes lowered toward the child. The moment felt almost sacred. Hidden high above the clearing, another pair of eyes watched everything. Lady Selene's spy gripped a tree branch so tightly his hands turned white. He had followed the strange magical trail through the forest. What he saw made his face lose all color. He whispered to himself, "What is that, child?" Without waiting another second, he climbed down from the tree. He ran back toward the palace as fast as he could. He had news that could change the kingdom forever. But he had no idea. Someone even faster was already riding toward the forest. King Kale. King Kale's horse raced through the sleeping kingdom like a shadow beneath the moon. Behind him rode his most trusted warriors. None of them dared speak. They had never seen their king move with such urgency. The guardian's howl still echoed in Kale's mind. It was not a cry of war. It was a summons. Something sacred was calling. As they reached the edge of the forest, Kale suddenly raised one hand. The riders stopped at once. He slowly climbed down from his horse. "The rest of you stay here." One captain stepped forward. "My king, it could be dangerous." Kale looked toward the glowing trees. "If the guardian wished me dead, I would never have reached this forest. I go alone." Without waiting for permission, he disappeared into the darkness. The deeper he walked, the stranger the forest became. Silver flowers covered the ground. Ancient trees glowed with faint blue light. The air itself felt alive. Then he heard it. Soft footsteps. Not an enemy. Someone running.
Ash.
The frightened voice echoed through the trees. "Ash, where are you?" Kale followed the sound. Moments later, he saw her. Elara stumbled through the forest, holding a small lantern. Her dress was torn by sharp branches. Blood stained one of her hands where thorns had cut her skin. She was exhausted, but she refused to stop searching.
Ash.
Please answer me. Kale watched silently. She was not searching for treasure. She was not running from danger. She was risking her life for a child everyone else had called worthless. Without thinking, he stepped from the shadows. "You should not be here." Elara gasped. She quickly turned toward the deep voice. Standing before her was the tall stranger she had seen only once from a distance. His dark cloak moved gently in the wind. His golden eyes reflected the moonlight. She did not know he was the Alpha King. She only knew he looked powerful. "I have to find him." Kale glanced at the blood on her hand. "The forest is dangerous tonight."
She shook her head.
"So is the world. But he is alone. I will not leave him." Kale studied her face. She was afraid. Anyone could see that. Yet she kept walking toward the danger instead of away from it. He quietly asked, "Who is he to you?" She answered without hesitation, "He is my family." Those simple words struck Kale harder than he expected. She had known the child only a short time, yet she spoke with the devotion of a mother. Before Kale could reply, a strange blue light suddenly flashed between the trees. The entire forest became silent. Elara looked toward the glow.
Ash. She ran.
Kale followed close behind. The trees opened into a wide clearing. Both of them stopped. Neither could believe what they were seeing. Hundreds of wolves surrounded the clearing. Gray wolves. White wolves. black wolves. Old wolves with silver fur. Young wolves with bright golden eyes. They stood in perfect silence. Not one moved. At the very center stood little Ash. His eyes were still closed. Blue light poured from beneath the old sack covering his head. Ancient symbols circled around his tiny feet. The wolves slowly lowered themselves until every one of them knelt before him. Elara whispered, "What is happening?" Kale did not answer. For the first time in his life, the fearless Alpha King had no explanation. He recognized many of the wolves. Some belonged to legends. Some had not been seen for generations. Yet every one of them bowed before the little pup. Suddenly Ash took one small step forward. The blue light became brighter. The old sack fluttered in the wind. For one brief moment, a glowing royal mark appeared beneath the edge of the cloth. Kale's eyes widened. He had seen that symbol only once before. Inside the oldest records of the royal family. It belonged to the lost bloodline. The bloodline that had vanished 20 years ago. Before he could move, Ash slowly opened his glowing blue eyes. For a single heartbeat, his gaze met Kale's. Then the light disappeared. Ash blinked in confusion. He looked around at the hundreds of wolves. Fear suddenly filled his tiny face. He turned and ran straight toward Elara. She dropped to her knees and wrapped both arms around him. "It is all right. I am here. No one will hurt you." Ash buried his face against her shoulder and began to cry. The wolves quietly stood. One by one they disappeared into the darkness without making a sound. Within moments the clearing was empty. Only the guardian remained. The great black wolf looked at Kale, then at Elara, holding Ash. Finally he lowered his head once more before vanishing into the forest. Silence returned. Kale looked at the frightened child, then at the young Omega who held him as though he were the most precious thing in the world. Deep inside, a single thought refused to leave his mind. This child is hiding a secret powerful enough to shake the kingdom. And somewhere far away inside the royal palace, Lady Selene smiled as her frightened spy fell to his knees before her. With trembling lips he whispered only 4 words. "My lady, we found the heir." The words echoed through Lady Selene's private chamber like the beginning of a storm. "My lady, we found the heir." The frightened spy remained on his knees. His whole body trembled. Selene slowly placed her wine glass onto the table. She did not look surprised. She looked interested. "Tell me everything." The spy swallowed hard. "There is a poor Omega living near the eastern forest. She rescued a small wolf pup from the market. I followed them. What I saw," he whispered, "should be impossible." Selene folded her arms. "Continue." The ancient wolves gathered around the child. They all knelt before him. The guardian bowed as well. The Alpha King witnessed everything. Silence filled the room. For several long seconds, Selene did not move. Then, she smiled. Not with happiness. With ambition. "So the forgotten prince is alive." She slowly walked toward the large window. Moonlight reflected in her cold eyes. "I spent years searching for him. And a useless Omega found him by accident." Her fingers tightened around the stone railing.
No.
It was never an accident. Fate has simply become inconvenient. She turned toward 3 masked warriors standing inside the room. Each wore black armor with no family crest. They were killers loyal only to gold. "I have a task for you." The tallest assassin lowered his head. "Name the target." Selene's voice remained calm. "The child. If you cannot take him alive." She paused. "Make sure no one else can." The assassins disappeared into the darkness, without another word. Selene looked toward the forest once more. "You should have stayed forgotten." Back in the eastern forest, Elara slowly carried Ash home. The little pup had fallen asleep against her shoulder. His tiny arms were still wrapped around her neck. Every few moments he whimpered softly, as though he was dreaming about something frightening. Kale walked several steps behind them. He said very little. His eyes never left the child. The glowing mark he had seen beneath the sack would not leave his thoughts. He knew the ancient stories. The lost royal bloodline. The hidden prince. The curse that had supposedly erased an entire family. None of it had ever been proven. Until tonight. Elara finally stopped walking. She turned toward the mysterious stranger. You helped me. Thank you. Kale looked at her quietly. You protected him. You deserve the thanks. She lowered her eyes. I only did what anyone should do. Kale almost answered. But he knew that was not true. Most people had laughed at the child, ignored him, or tried to hurt him. Only one person had chosen kindness. The poorest Omega in the kingdom. You are wrong. His deep voice was calm. Very few people would have done what you did. Elara did not know how to answer. No one had ever praised her before. She simply smiled politely. I should go. He needs rest. Kale nodded once. Before she could leave, he spoke again. If danger comes, she looked back. Run toward the northern cliffs. You will find help there. She frowned slightly. How do you know that? For the first time, a faint smile appeared on Kale's face. I simply do. Without another word, he disappeared into the shadows. Elara watched him leave. There is something strange about him. She whispered the words to herself, then continued walking home. High above the trees, Kale's captain stepped out from hiding. My king. Kale looked toward the small cabin in the distance. Place guards around the forest. The captain nodded. Secretly. No one must know. And especially not the Omega. The captain hesitated. You believe the child truly is. Kale interrupted him. I believe someone will come for him. And when they do, his golden eyes became cold. They will learn that this forest is no longer unprotected. Far away, another group was already moving through the darkness. The assassins sent by Selene crossed the river without making a sound. Their blades reflected the moonlight. One of them unfolded a worn map. He pointed toward a tiny cabin near the edge of the woods. There. The child is inside. Another assassin quietly smiled. This will be over before sunrise. None of them noticed dozens of glowing eyes watching from deep inside the forest. The ancient wolves had returned. And they were not the only ones waiting. Hidden among the trees, King Kale silently rested one hand on the hilt of his sword. His gaze never left Elara's cabin. Then the night grew unnaturally quiet. Even the wind stopped blowing. Kale slowly looked toward the darkness. They're here. The forest held its breath. No birds sang. No leaves moved. Even the wind seemed afraid to make a sound. King Kale rested one hand on the hilt of his sword. His sharp eyes searched the darkness between the trees. They're here. Only a heartbeat later, a shadow flashed through the forest. Then another. 3 masked assassins slipped silently between the trees. Each carried poisoned blades. Each moved like a ghost. Their eyes were fixed on one place. Elara's cabin. The leader raised one hand. The other stopped. He pointed toward the small wooden house. The child. No mistakes. No witnesses. The assassins separated. One moved toward the back window. One climbed onto the roof. The leader crept toward the front door. Inside the cabin, everything was peaceful. Elara slept beside the fireplace. Ash rested under his blanket. His tiny paw still held the corner of Elara's sleeve. Even in sleep, he refused to let her go. Outside, a floorboard creaked. Kale's eyes narrowed. Without warning, he stepped from the shadows. His deep voice cut through the silence. You've come a long way. The assassins froze. The leader slowly turned. The moment he recognized the man standing before him, his face lost all color. The Alpha King. Kale stood perfectly still. You chose the wrong house. The leader gave a sharp signal. The 3 assassins attacked at once. Steel flashed beneath the moonlight. Kale moved like lightning. The first blade never reached him. His sword struck once. The assassin crashed into a tree. The second attacker leaped from the roof. Kale caught his arm. With one powerful motion, he threw him across the yard. The man hit the ground and could not stand again. The third assassin rushed toward the cabin instead. He ignored Kale completely. His only target was Ash. Inside the cabin, Ash suddenly opened his eyes. He heard footsteps. Elara woke at the same moment. She looked toward the door. Another loud crash shook the cabin. The wooden door burst open. A masked assassin charged inside with his blade raised. Elara did not stop to think. She threw herself in front of Ash. "You will not touch him." The assassin swung his sword. Before the blade could reach her, a powerful force slammed into him from the side. The wall exploded into pieces. The man flew across the room. King Kale stood between Elara and the attacker. His sword pointed directly at the assassin's throat. "You dare." His calm voice carried more fear than a roar. "No one threatens those under my protection." The assassin laughed weakly. "You are too late." Kale frowned. "What do you mean?" The man suddenly bit down on a hidden poison capsule. Within seconds, blood filled his mouth. He smiled one final time. "This is only the beginning." Then his body fell still. Silence returned. Elara hugged Ash tightly. Her heart would not stop racing. Ash buried his face against her shoulder. His tiny body trembled. Kale slowly lowered his sword. He looked at Elara. "You are hurt." She glanced at her arm. A shallow cut crossed her sleeve. She had not even noticed. "It is nothing." Kale stepped closer. "It is not nothing."
His voice softened.
"You stood in front of a blade." She looked down at Ash. "I would do it again." Kale searched her eyes. There was no hesitation. No regret. Only love for a child who was not even her own. For the first time in years, something inside the Alpha King shifted. Strength was not only measured by power. Sometimes, the strongest heart belonged to the weakest person. Outside the broken cabin, dozens of wolves slowly emerged from the darkness. None of them attacked. They simply surrounded the house. Standing guard, Kale looked toward the forest. "They are protecting him," Elara whispered. "They are protecting us." Kale nodded slowly.
"No."
"They are protecting the future." Before either of them could speak again, one of Kale's royal guards came running from the trees. He dropped to one knee. "My king, we captured another assassin alive." Kale's eyes became cold again. "Bring him." Moments later, two soldiers dragged the wounded man into the clearing. The assassin laughed despite the blood on his face. "You have already lost." Kale stepped forward. "Who sent you?" The man remained silent. Kale's golden eyes locked onto his. "Answer." The assassin smiled. Then he whispered just one name. "Selene." The forest fell silent once more. Elara looked at Kale in confusion. She had never heard that name before. But Kale knew exactly who it belonged to.
His jaw tightened.
His gaze turned toward the distant palace beyond the mountains. At that very moment, he realized this was no random attack. Someone inside the royal court was hunting the child. The name hung in the cold night air like a curse. Selene. King Kale did not speak. His face remained calm, but every royal guard standing behind him felt the change. The temperature seemed to drop. Even the wolves surrounding the cabin became restless. The captured assassin laughed weakly. "You cannot protect him forever. There are others. They will keep coming." Kale slowly walked toward him. Each step was slow, controlled, powerful. He stopped only inches away. "Who else knows about the child?" The assassin smiled through blood. "You are already too late. The palace is moving. The hunt has begun." Before anyone could stop him, the assassin slammed his head against a hidden poison needle inside his collar. His body went still. Another witness had chosen death over betrayal. One of the royal guards cursed under his breath. Kale looked down at the lifeless man.
"No."
He was silenced. His captain stepped forward. "My king, if Lady Selene truly ordered this." Kale interrupted him. "We speak of this to no one. Not until I have proof." The captain lowered his head. "Yes, my king." Behind them, Elara quietly cleaned the small cut on her arm with a damp cloth. Ash refused to leave her side. He clung tightly to her sleeve. His tiny hands still trembled. Elara gently stroked his back. "It is over. You are safe." Ash slowly looked up. For the first time, he spoke clearly. "Safe." His small voice was barely louder than a whisper. Elara froze. Her eyes filled with tears. "You spoke." Ash looked surprised himself. He softly repeated the word. "Safe." A warm smile spread across Elara's face. She gently touched his little cheek. Yes. You're safe. King Kale silently watched the moment. The child had barely spoken since they met. Yet his first clear word was not his own name. It was the feeling Elara had given him. Safety. Kale looked away for a moment. Something deep inside his guarded heart shifted again. His captain quietly noticed. I have never seen you look at anyone like that. Kale answered without emotion. I am looking at courage. Morning slowly arrived. Golden sunlight spread across the forest. The broken cabin looked worse than ever. The front wall had collapsed during the attack. Pieces of wood covered the ground. Rain from the night before had soaked everything inside. Elara sighed softly. I suppose we have a lot of work to do. Without another word, she picked up a broken board. Ash immediately grabbed a smaller piece. He struggled to carry it. It was almost bigger than he was. Elara laughed. You are helping again. Ash nodded proudly. Nearby, several royal guards secretly began repairing the cabin. They worked quietly so Elara would believe kind travelers had offered help. Kale himself lifted heavy beams into place. He wore a plain dark cloak over his armor. Elara walked toward him. You do not have to help. Kale placed another wooden beam onto the wall. It needs fixing. She smiled politely. I cannot repay you. He looked at her. I did not ask for payment. For a moment neither of them spoke. Only the sound of hammers echoed through the trees. Ash watched them from a distance. His tiny tail wagged. He slowly picked a small white flower growing beside the cabin. Then he walked toward Kale. He held out the flower with both hands. Kale stared at it. No one had ever given the Alpha King a flower before, especially not a child. Ash smiled beneath the old sack. For you. Kale slowly accepted it. Thank you. His voice was softer than usual. Ash happily ran back to Elara. She smiled at Kale. He likes you. Kale looked down at the tiny flower resting in his hand. For reasons he could not explain, it felt more valuable than the jeweled gifts nobles had offered him for years. But the peaceful morning did not last. Far away inside the royal palace, Lady Selene stood before a massive ancient mirror. One frightened servant knelt beside her. The assassins failed. Selene remained silent. They are all dead. Still, she did not react. Instead, she slowly opened an old leather scroll stolen from the royal archives. Ancient symbols covered the faded parchment. At the center was a drawing. A small child. A sack covering his head. Below it were words written in the oldest language of the kingdom. Selene whispered the translation. When the hidden heir is loved without expecting reward, the ancient curse shall begin to break. Her eyes narrowed. So, it is her. The Omega is destroying the curse. She slowly rolled the scroll closed, then smiled. If kindness is breaking the magic. Her voice became cold. Then I will make sure kindness dies first. Far away in the peaceful forest, a cold breeze suddenly swept through the trees. Kale looked toward the distant palace. His instincts screamed that something far more dangerous than assassins was about to begin. The peaceful morning slowly faded into afternoon. Warm sunlight covered the little cabin. For the first time since Ash had arrived, the broken house almost looked like a real home. Fresh wooden boards replaced the shattered wall. The roof no longer leaked. A small garden had even begun to bloom beside the front steps. Elara looked around in amazement. She still believed kind travelers had helped her rebuild everything. She had no idea the strongest alpha warriors in the kingdom had worked through the night under their king's orders. Ash happily ran around the yard. He laughed as butterflies circled above the flowers. Every time he smiled, more blossoms opened around him. Elara noticed it this time. She gently knelt beside him. Ash. These flowers. They only bloom when you laugh. Ash tilted his head. He looked at the tiny white flowers growing beneath his feet. He touched one softly. The flower glowed for a brief moment. Then another flower bloomed beside it. Elara stared in silence. She remembered the glowing symbols beneath his sack. The wolves kneeling before him. The strange light in the forest. None of it made sense anymore. But one thing did. Ash was not an ordinary pup. He had been carrying a secret from the very beginning. Before she could ask another question, a gentle voice came from behind her. You noticed it. Elara turned. An elderly woman stood near the garden gate. She wore faded gray robes. A long wooden staff rested in her hand. Her silver hair reached almost to her waist. Her eyes were old, yet full of kindness. Elara quickly stood. I am sorry. I did not hear you arrive. The old woman smiled. Very few people ever do. Her eyes slowly moved toward Ash. The smile disappeared. Instead, she quietly lowered her head. Not to Elara, to the child. Ash looked at her with innocent curiosity. The old healer whispered softly. So, you survived. Elara frowned. You know him. The woman looked at Elara. I know what he carries. She slowly walked closer. May I examine him? Ash looked toward Elara. He waited for her answer. She smiled gently. It is your choice. Ash hesitated for a moment, then slowly walked toward the old healer. She carefully placed one hand above the old sack. She never touched it. Her eyes closed. A faint golden light surrounded her fingers. Suddenly, the light turned deep blue. The healer quickly pulled her hand back. Her breathing became heavy. Tears filled her eyes. It is true. Elara became frightened. What is wrong? The old woman looked at her with deep sadness. Nothing is wrong with the child. The danger. She glanced toward the distant mountains. Is coming from people. Elara held Ash close again. I do not understand. The healer sighed. You do not need to understand everything today. But you must listen carefully. She looked directly into Elara's eyes. The love you have given this child. It is breaking a very ancient curse. Elara whispered. A curse. The healer nodded. Every day he feels safe. Every day he is loved. The magic protecting his true identity grows weaker. Ash quietly held Elara's hand. The old woman smiled sadly at him. You were never meant to be alone. Then her expression became serious again. She turned back to Elara. Powerful people will come. They will smile. They will lie. They will promise to help. But many of them will only want the child. Elara tightened her arms around Ash. I will never give him away. The healer nodded. I know. That is why fate chose you. Before leaving, the old woman reached into her robe. She removed a small silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon. She placed it into Elara's hand. When the moon shines blue, keep this close. It may save both of your lives. Without another word, she walked back toward the forest. Within moments, she disappeared among the trees as though she had never been there. Elara stared at the pendant. Questions filled her mind.
Who was Ash?
Why did everyone seem to know something she did not? Why were strangers suddenly appearing at her little cabin? High above the forest, King Kale had witnessed the entire meeting from a distant cliff. His captain quietly approached. My king. The healer confirmed your suspicions. Kale slowly nodded. Yes. His eyes remained fixed on the cabin below. The curse is weakening. The captain lowered his voice. Should we bring the child to the palace? Kale remained silent for several moments. Finally, he answered.
No.
The palace is the most dangerous place in the kingdom. He looked toward Elara. Right now, the safest place for the future of this kingdom is beside one poor Omega who still believes kindness is stronger than power. But neither Kale nor Elara knew that Lady Selene had already made her next move. Inside the royal archives, she slowly unrolled another forbidden scroll. A cruel smile appeared on her face as she whispered, If I cannot steal the child, I will make the kingdom believe the Omega stole him. And with those words, the trap that would destroy Elara's peaceful life was finally set.